Hi, my name is Annette Harpole, and I'm here with Mr. Granville and Mrs. Billie Joe Sims at their beautiful home in Milwaukee, and with my dad, Reuben K. Harpole Jr., and my mother, who's off to the side. And we're here today to talk about Milwaukee's Bronzeville district. When they grew up in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, it was the Walnut Street area was a vibrant community. So they're here to talk about their experiences growing up in Milwaukee, particularly as Black Americans, and to try to help us understand what it was like to be Black in Milwaukee, and talk about the thriving businesses that were here and some of the good times that they remember as well. So I'd like to have you all three talk about your experiences, please.
Well, I lived with my grandfather and grandmother and my mother and my two sisters, Gloria and Marjorie Harpole, at 807 West Summer Street. We lived just a few blocks east of the Walnut Street, of the Wonder Bread and Mrs. Drink's potato chips.
Yes, I remember very well.
Yeah, and Old Man Rob's coal place, right on 9th and Summers. And we had a beautiful neighborhood. My grandfather had a rental bicycle station called Johnson Rental Bicycle. And he used to rent those bicycles for 25 cents an hour or 50 cents for 3 hours. You'd get a break if you wanted to ride for 3 hours.
I remember that.
Yeah. And then when we were a little small, he put a merry-go-round in the yard so that we didn't have to leave the yard to play, because we had the whole corner at 807 West Summer Street. And years later, he purchased Mr. Gray's grocery store, which was right across the street from our house. And the lady that owned QF&H restaurant had a little restaurant across the street also. I used to get hamburgers from there. So that was a great neighborhood. We had artists that played tenor saxophone, Evans that played the drums, and he married Amanda Holt, Michael Holt's auntie or cousin. And the musicians used to come over to my house because my mother could play the piano, and they'd jam at our house. So I would hear the musicians playing at the house. And
Where did you live where were you living at the time?
807 West Summer Street. And living in that block was Monk, that had Monk's barbecue shop, and his brother, and artists, and also around the area, as well as in the summertime, we'd look forward to summer coming so we could go up to Lapham Park swimming pool and swim. And my grandmother used to worry about me getting black, and I used to want to be black. So so I would go up there and stand and play in the sun, so I'd get the suntan, and watch the Sims swim, because Sylvester Sims could dive. He could dive better than anybody in the neighborhood. And I found out something about Sylvester, that why he was able to outswim everybody in the neighborhood, because he had webbed feet, toes together. And when he hit the water, he zipped through there. And they were also lifeguards. And the guy that used to tell a lot of jokes was Jimmy Carter. Remember?
Jimmy Carter, better known as Fox.
Fox, yeah. Fox could lie. He could tell lies and have whole crowds of people standing around listening to him lie. And he was also a guard. And Big Bunky Green was a guard also, remember? Yeah. And Bunky told me before he passed, he wanted to tell a story about the guy that ran the Lapham Park swimming pool. He said because the city didn't care what they did, and they put some chemicals in there, and that caused him to die.
Well,
he was a lifeguard.
that story I can tell you about. I was a lifeguard too. And The guy that died, we called him Tiny. He was big and he was very prejudiced.
Right.
The reason, not a hatred prejudice, stereotype.
Right.
And how he died, we had to put chlorine in the water.
Right. Right. Exactly.
So he was the type of person who couldn't tell anything.
Right.
And he went in to put in the chlorine.
Right.
And he was supposed to wear a mask. He
Right.
went in there, he
Right.
didn't. And that's how he died.
Oh, okay.
From overdose of chlorine.
Right.
We called him Tiny. And they were very prejudiced. He was, and then the guy that ran the county, can't think of his name, maybe I will later, he was very prejudiced. And he would always tell us as we became lifeguards that we couldn't he couldn't assign us to any other pool like on the south side because they
Right.
wouldn't pay any attention to us.
Right.
But then Fox was a lifeguard at the same time that I was. Jimmy Carter was
Right.
his real name. And something happened, one of us was talking over the fence to somebody was asked us the question. And he saw this. And he wanted to fire me. And you're looking over the fence if somebody's gonna talk to you, you gotta answer it.
Right.
Well, it came to the point where Fox told him, well, if he goes, I goes. He says, what are the white guys gonna do? You said that they won't pay any attention to a lifeguard black on the south side. What do you think is gonna happen to the lifeguards here?
Right.
So he changed his mind, and like I said, it was so much prejudice
Right.
at that particular time.
Right.
And since we had moved off of Winnebago to 10th and Brown, that was around 1938, 1939, when they built the pool.
Yeah, at Ninth and Brown.
And so we had problems.
What?
Sylvester and I wanted to go swimming. All of the African Americans went on 8th and Highland.
Right.
Well, after we moved on 10th and Brown, and 16th and North was the closest natatorium.
Natatorium, right.
So Sylvester and I was going to go, and Daddy wanted us in there. And he said, why don't you go down on the island?
Yeah, right.
And there was so much. Eugene, my
prejudice.
best friend I was raised with, he and I were walking. He lived on 11th and Brown, I lived on 10th and Brown. And we were walking up on Capitol Drive, which was a dream for most blacks.
Right.
And we just was admiring those beautiful homes.
Right.
We got stopped, asked us, why are you up here? We're just looking at the homes. You go back where you belong.
Oh, yeah.
So we ran into a lot
Right.
of prejudice. The only help that we had from the police is when the police athletic league opened and we played baseball.
Right.
Oh.
And that helped because the police at that time were our coaches. So we got a lot of recognition. It was nice. The police got a chance to get to know the kids, and where most of them were at a particular time. They was either on a Haymarket or
Right.
Latin Park.
Yeah.
And if you weren't playing, you were there watching another teams for the standings.
When was Mr. Cheney a police officer?
While
we were
he
growing
was the
up.
first black sergeant,
Okay.
and he was
Falmers Cheney.
yeah.
Well, he lived in the neighborhood, and
He sure did.
he
I
know
Montague.
most of us kids,
And Al Wright became our coach of one of our teams that I was on.
Yeah.
The policeman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They had, every summer the police, with the PAL, police authorities, we called them the PAL.
Yeah.
And
Right.
It's
the
still
police
around.
were were the coaches
Right.
of these teams.
Right.
So you knew where a lot of the kids, or most of them, were at that particular time. They were either playing baseball or you were trying to watch to see how another team was coming on for your standings, and it worked out fairly well.
What can you talk about the the rock, was it the Lapham
Oh, that-
rock?
So that big rock on that was on Walnut Street.
Right.
Yeah,
On
okay.
Facing-
8th and Walnut.
Facing,
South.
it was right in front of Roosevelt Junior High School.
Right.
Yeah.
Can you tell the story about that rock and what you used to do?
Well,
I
the
can't-
story about the rock is that it was placed there by the Old Settlers Club to honor Increase Allen Lapham.
okay.
And I thought it was a penny up there, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
It was a plaque that they had carved out. Some guy in Pittsburgh carved out Increase Allen Lapham's picture and placed it on that rock. And Increase Allen Lapham was the first scientist out of Wisconsin. He created the weather program, and he lived on 5th and Walnut.
Yeah.
And he also was the first one to design the school district, and also Forest Home Cemetery. That's where he's buried now.
Yeah,
Forest Home
right.
Cemetery.
Yeah, we had, you know, growing up, we had a lot of things going. I think as young boys, I should say, I understand that there, you know, were a lot of problems. I shouldn't say a lot of problems. There were problems, I guess, by them being more explorative and just being boys, you know. I don't think the girls, I don't think we went through some of the things that they would, you know, go through. Walnut Street was a place that we would end up going to probably later in the evenings. The Roosevelt Junior High School was there. That's where we would sit, talk, run around, play, take pictures. That was a famous place for people to take pictures of themselves as well as their families.
In front of Roosevelt?
In front of Roosevelt Junior High School.
And at Lapham Park.
And
Social
Lapham
Center.
Park Social Center. And also it was incorporated with 9th Street School.
Right.
And at the Social Center, there was the library, was also housed in there. And then we had Ethel Brunner, who was one of the first black African-American directors to come there. And she was a wonderful person. She
Yeah.
opened up a lot of programs for girls. We had a modern dance class. She sponsored the girls' baseball games. She was very active. She would plan trips for a lot of us who had, you know, really never come out of the community to let us see that there are other things that, you know, was available to us. We also had Girl Scouts, and that was housed out of the Urban League. And we had quite a few young women growing up at that time who, you know, would take us out to camp. Hales Corners, we didn't even know where Hales Corners was at that time. We would go and camp in those cabins, you know, and that kind of thing. So we were sort of exposed to a lot of positive things. It wasn't too much negative things that were going on at that time. You could walk up and down the alleys any time of night, in the morning, nobody bothered you, you know, and it was a situation that if you did misbehave, your parents found it out before you got home.
Right.
And they wouldn't wait till you got home, because whoever saw you doing it would give it to you before you got home. So it was a situation where, as they say, it takes a village to raise a child. It was that kind of thing when we were growing up. There was no such thing. Everybody knew everybody. When people would come to
Get some more if you want.
when people would come to Milwaukee, we had what we called our host family, and these were the Tollivers, okay?
Oh, yeah.
This was a couple who had about 7 children, okay? They lived across the street in the rear on 7th and right off of 7th and Brown. When new people would arrive into Milwaukee, it was really strange. Most of them would come by bus. And somehow or another, we never figured out that they would always get sent to our community. And the word was go to Walnut Street. These people would get to Walnut Street or into our area and into our community, and they would have no place to go, no food, no clothing. And they were migrating, okay?
From the South?
From the South.
During the Great Migration?
Yes, and whatever area they were coming from. And the Tollivers' house was always open.
Right.
And that's where they would go.
Yeah.
That's where they
Oh,
would
man,
go.
Tolliver, Deacon Tolliver.
And they Deacon Tolliver, and they would feed you, put clothes on you, see that you would have a place to stay, and they were welcome within the community just like they would been there forever.
Mhm.
You could go out of town. We have gone out of town with our families, and I have come home and found relatives in my house because nobody locked doors. And they would come and they would be saying, "Oh yeah, we know where the Andrews live. Yeah, I'll take you there." And they would come and we would come home and we'd have company sitting up in the house. So it was one of those relationships that we had, you know.
Yeah, but I didn't want to interrupt you, but you know, a lot of that caused, there was only a small group of us. See, and things change as more people come in, different cultures, where they were raised, like from the South, than we were raised in the North. And as the more people that came in, the more we got away from our old ways. And then the older people started to die out, and a lot of the traditions that we're looking out for each other go. A good example is across the street from us. When I first moved there, I wouldn't speak, wouldn't talk to anybody. And later on, I'm going to make this short, later on they found out that they could get along with other people. Now we try to help them out. When his wife broke her leg and stuff, they begin to realize everybody is not the same.
Right.
That you can't mistrust everybody. When we came up, we got along because there wasn't as many African Americans. We knew most of the people, and you could get along. Now there's people migrating out of California, out of South, and they're all coming here, but they're looking for a better life.
Mhm.
But to keep a better life, you have to do something about it. It just won't happen by talking about it. You have to do something about it. You know what I mean? You know, the crime rate was unheard of now when we came up. It was just unheard of. You didn't even think about that it would ever happen. But that is because we've let our guard down. I don't know where we dropped the ball, but it's changed. People's attitude has changed. I don't know. And we were all poor. So, like you say, you didn't have to worry about stealing.
You don't need none
You're
of
gonna
that.
steal it. Nobody had anything. And sure, we had little fights and stuff. You get in a fight, and 2 hours later, you'd be playing together.
You'd be best friends.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, we had the Regal, and that was our Friday night place, boy.
The
I'll
Regal
tell you.
Theater?
The Regal Theater.
And was
yes,
that Bernice
yes.
Lindsay, Mrs.
Yeah,
Lindsay?
Yeah, we
Okay.
had a good time at that Regal, I tell you. We would always,
Where was it?
it was right on
7th and Walnut.
7th and Walnut,
Mhm.
right there, almost to the corner. We had some really good, my sister-in-law, Sylvester's wife, Betty, she was one of the popcorn girls, and she was working there.
Right.
And I would love to go to the Regal and see the cereals and some of the other, and then we would have what they would call the black comedies that were really, funny, and we enjoyed ourselves. So we had, and then on Sunday, everybody would go to church, and then that's when everybody would go downtown to the movies. Sometimes we would go to the Regal and then go downtown.
Friday night
So
was the Regal night.
Yeah,
Oh,
so
wow.
it was depending on, how much money you could get out of your parents or your uncles and your grandmas.
And the cost was only about
what-
25 cents.
Yeah, so, that was one of the, good things about it. And then also we had all the businesses on Walnut Street. And we had Claire's Restaurant. We had Bebop Record Shop. Roses. We had the pool hall.
What's the barbecue place called?
And T. Joe's.
There was
Music
a.
Cafe.
What was the barbecue place?
Larry's Frozen Custard.
Okay, Black King was, and he was located in the. He
hold
started.
on.
He started down in the Haymarket first,
Okay.
and then he moved up into the living of our quarters and stuff. Yeah, but we had a lot of businesses going. Larry's Frozen Custard and Knox's Restaurant It was just really
and turned a
fun.
beauty shop and rolled
Yeah.
a beauty shop.
Yeah.
And what
yeah,
about the
all
nightclubs? What were the nightclubs called?
Oh, God.
Well, the nightclubs was off of Winnebago, the Flame.
And Juneau.
Yeah.
The Blue Note.
Blue Note.
See,
Moon
the
Gold.
Moon Glow.
Wow.
Savoy.
Yeah.
Is that where all the
Savoy.
entertainers?
That's where, yeah. Most of the entertainers would end up down at the Flame. They were quite popular for, the entertainments and coming. People would come to,
Loretta White was a pianist there.
yeah,
And
and
her
then,
husband on the Flame.
and then when they would come, to Milwaukee, the entertainers couldn't stay downtown. So they would stay in people's homes.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's where I got to meet, oh gosh, what is his name?
Duke Ellington?
No, I got to meet,
Addie Man.
the one who would sing Caledonia, and I hated that song. I hated that song. And he would sing it all the time just because I did not like it. And he stayed with Mr. and Mrs. O.B.,
Oh, yeah.
who lived upstairs from Gerdine Turner, who had a beauty shop downstairs.
Right.
Oh, okay.
And their daughter Jacqueline,
Yeah.
she and I were really close, and
She the one that married, what's his name?
I can't think of his name right now. But anyway, she was supposed to iron.
Brown.
She was supposed to iron this guy's shirt, and it was silk. And of course, we'd never seen, silk shirts and stuff before. And Jacqueline sucked her thumb. Okay, so she's ironing this shirt with one hand,
Oh,
and she burned this man's shirt.
A lot of people had the wrong
So we
impression.
hid it. We hid it.
Catherine
Because he
Brown.
had so many shirts, he wouldn't know the difference.
A lot of people got the wrong
Turner
impression of
daughter married
Walnut
Catherine
Street.
Brown.
Oh,
okay.
really?
And their
Yeah.
sons in Tony Brown.
In Walnut
in
Street.
California.
Oh, okay.
As a kid, I wasn't allowed on Walnut Street. Go to the YMCA
Right.
or to the Reuben.
Was that the Booker T. Washington YMCA?
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
And the reason was not that Walnut Street was so bad, but between 6th, 7th, and up to 12th, it was for adults mostly, except for the Regal and the YMCA. There was some taverns, the Apex, Bootleg Cab,
Right.
Soul Policy,
Yeah, I drove there.
and it was for an adults. Not that there was crime. I can't remember any crime on Walnut Street. I don't know if you could, but it was just for an adults. We youngsters. When I'd come home, my mother would say, "You been on Walnut Street?" And the word got out and made it sound like it was a bad area, but it was for adults. That's what Walnut Street
Well,
was.
nobody thought it was a bad area. It
Well,
was just
maybe you're wrong
was
in your
just-
area, but they.
No, it was just an area for adults. This is what
That's what I'm saying,
that's how it was
but
set
the
up.
word
but-
was out. If
but-
you know, and I'm sure you've heard about Walnut Street, a lot of people here, they say Walnut Street bad.
No.
It wasn't bad, it was
Yeah.
just mostly for elders, taverns and stuff like that.
I thought-
It was called a scene.
Yeah, okay, because
Yeah,
the way my dad described it was the place. Well, my dad was a musician,
Yeah.
so that's where a lot of the musicians would go, and that's where you'd have fun and entertainment
Yeah,
and
that's
eat
what it
food
was.
like
Yeah.
barbecue and
Yeah.
soul food and things like
And
that.
as we got older, then we, as teenagers, then we would always hang out around there after the football games.
Larry's Frozen Custard.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah.
Yeah.
Then we would hang out, after the football games during the winter. And
What
fall.
were the
Yeah.
high school rivalries?
Oh, of course, Lincoln and North Division.
Still are.
I went to North Division, graduated from North Division, but I would always go to the Lincoln's game.
Right.
Because they were always the top dogs.
Yeah, all my friends
Yeah.
went to Lincoln.
And then we would have, then we had, proms and junior prom and senior prom, which was really, the last hurrah, which was very exciting, and then you took part in, then all of a sudden we started programs that was including blacks. And so at North Division, I started getting shows by some of the teenagers. So I would get permission to get some of the guys who played instruments from Lincoln, and they would come to North, And then I would get Miss Bruna. She would choreograph a dance for us, and then we would do our whole thing, you know. And all of a sudden, it was really an exciting situation for us, you know. So we would put our, you know, chest out. It didn't last very long, but at least we made ourselves heard and let them know that we, you know, were people who were talented just as those, you know, the whites were in that building. Because I got upset with the idea that we were told that we could not take the swimming class.
At North Division?
Yes, at North Division, because they didn't know how we would act going to the 16th Street natatorium. I was told that
Excuse me, on 16th and North, at natatorium you mentioned, did not want Sylvester and I in there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was told that I could not get into the Booster Club because you had to write a letter in order to get into the Booster Club, which I did. I was the first black to get into the Booster Club.
Wow.
They totally ignored me until they were getting ready to come up with our junior parade. They needed flowers. They couldn't afford flowers. They didn't know where they were going to get the flowers. So I said, I can make flowers. So then all of a sudden, I was the one, okay? So I put them all to work, showed them how, and I did not make one flower.
You directed.
Yes, yes.
And what was the Booster Club?
The Booster Club, we
yeah.
we sort of boost whatever activities that were going on in the school, like the plays, the basketball game, football game, you know, the booster, you know, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was the Booster Club.
Equal to
They ran the school
cheerleaders.
social.
Cheerleaders,
They ran
yeah.
the school social.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So we came up in an area where after you left 9th Street School, you went to Roosevelt. And Roosevelt was totally integrated. A lot of Jewish, a lot of Germans, and African Americans. Not a lot of African Americans, but I was at the age where when more started coming in, and it was nice. We, you know, people got along. We had a lot of different races going to Roosevelt at the time, but
I had one.
friends with anybody, it didn't make any difference.
I had one friend. She was Jewish. Her name was Sandra Bach, and her dad owned the delicatessen on the corner of 9th and Walnut. And we got to, I don't know, all of a sudden, I was the only one she could play with. Then my mom found out that we could get sandwiches and stuff from there, and Mr. Bach would set them up, you know, in baskets and stuff for us. This only happened when company would come from out of town. As blacks, you only had one place to go. That was to Washington Park. I swore that when I got grown, I was never, ever going to Washington Park.
The zoo was out there.
That's where the zoo was.
Oh.
So anyway, Bach would pack up the corned beef, the pickles, and everything else in this basket. And that's what we would take all the time to Washington Park.
When was Jake's Deli? Was Jake's Deli there?
No, Jake came along much longer.
Oh.
Jake's was on Philippe Street.
And then we
I
had
think, I think.
Jake's was also, wasn't it on Locust and Oakland?
yeah, many years. Yeah.
Many. When I first came,
Yeah, then they
that's where
moved to
Jake's was.
Oakland over there on the east side.
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Then we had we I don't know, we just had so many things going at that time of our lives that it was a good life, you know?
I have two questions. Dad, you used to say that people would gather around Lapham Rock to discuss topics of the day or something.
That was in front of the rock.
Okay,
Mhm.
if you can talk about that, and then also the Booker T. Washington YMCA. How was that? What part did that play in your life? And was it Mrs. Gaines?
Mr. Gaines.
Mrs. Gaines came later, maybe.
That was founded by Clarence Johnson, who petitioned the downtown YMCA, for us in Central City.
Wasn't
And he had
the
graduated from Tuskegee under Booker T. Washington.
Wasn't he the tailor?
Hmm?
Wasn't he the
No,
tailor?
He was a tailor.
That's
I
what,
guess-
yeah.
and-
Him and his wife had a tailor shop.
Not only that, he ran the North Side YMCA on Walnut Street. Johnson.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
what he just
Mr.
said.
He was there, yeah.
Yeah,
But he then hired Ralph Jefferson. And here's what I found out after he had died. He used his money that he made at Ideal Cleaners to pay the salaries of everybody who was working there.
Yeah, I knew that.
That was fantastic.
I knew that. My great uncle told me that.
Okay.
When you was young, you was problem with the segregation.
Hmm?
When you was young, you was problem with segregation with the white people.
He had
When
problems
you were
with
young?
segregation.
Yeah, when I was younger, okay,
Mm-hmm.
my aspect is different from his, okay? Growing up, I did not have this thing of segregation because I didn't live that. I grew up at 9th Street, Roosevelt Junior High School, North Division, okay? These were people. I never said white. I never used the word black because that was not our vocabulary at that time. So therefore, whatever was going on at that time, you participated in it. It didn't matter, you know, what you were. Now, you were friends with them, but when they went home, they were gone. You didn't visit their house. But now some of them would come and visit your house, but you would never be able to go to their house. And it was just something that you knew. You know, it was just something that you knew. And at that age, when I would go home, and I brought my kids up like this, when I would go home and I would say, this child, I would say the name, and I had this, or we did this, or we're going this place. My parents never asked me whether it was a white person, Italian, or whatever. That never came in. So I didn't have that in my life. And I had white people, I have Indian, and I had Hispanics at that time in my family. Okay? I brought my children up the same way. Because when they got their first white aunt, the first thing came out of one of his mind was, Mama, do I have to hate her? And I'm going, where did you get that from? I said, no, that's your aunt. She's a person, she loves you, and you love her. When they were going to school, they would come and say, Mom, I got this friend, can I bring him over? I never asked. It's in the home. That's where that comes from.
You know,
It's in the home.
we never discussed race in my house. My mother was white. You couldn't tell her from a white lady. See, she was from Louisiana, and my dad was from Louisiana. Dad was maybe your complexion. And we didn't discuss race in the house. We did with my friends. We did. But in the house and my parents, we didn't talk race. We didn't discuss it.
But it became important because you could tell that the society had thought of you as black people.
Yes. Yeah. And then
Well, so I'm going to be honest with you. I caught hell on both sides because of my light skin. I had blacks hating me just as much as white did. and believe me, what hurt the most was when blacks didn't like me.
O.C. Webb, Henry Webb, and O.C. Tucker, and O.C. White.
O.C. White was a good guy.
Yeah,
O.C. White
yeah.
did a lot. O.C.
Yeah.
White was a good person. O.C. and I ran around a little bit when we were younger.
Right.
But in my family, we didn't talk black or white. We didn't talk that.
Mr. Harpole, what was the historical situation in that time? What was the historical situation
The
in
historical situation.
historical situation in that time?
Okay. We had a community that loved each other. It was from about State Street to Walnut. And everything that happened on Billie Street, which is a little bit north of State Street, they had the Colonial Theater. And then on North Avenue and about Teutonia, they had the Milwaukee Theater. And then 7th and Walnut was the Regal Theater. And that's where our jazz musicians, Billie Wallace, Bunky Green, Willie Pickens and others would play. And trying to think of
The one who was in Minnesota for a while. I can't think of his name either. He became a famous jazz musician and played at the Paps before he died.
Oh, that's Billie Wallace. He brought a guy from Minnesota down to sing.
Yeah, well, the man I'm talking about, he had a drug problem for a while, and he was living up in Minnesota, and then he performed in Milwaukee. I just can't think of his name right now. And we went to see him at the Paps Theater maybe 10 years ago, 10, 15 years ago.
But practically all the musicians would walk up and down Walnut Street. That's why parents didn't want their daughters on Walnut Street.
Yeah, because it was mostly for elderly people. It wasn't that there was any crime or a lot of fighting or stuff.
But they
It
were
was
drinking.
just mostly for older people, that's all.
Yeah, 7-Eleven.
So you mentioned, the founders. Who founded the Booker T. Washington YMCA again?
Was Clarence Johnson.
Clarence Johnson and his
And his
Cleopatra.
His wife,
wife.
Cleopatra.
And then the OBs.
And then
Mr. and
also Miss Bernice Lindsay was a part of that too.
Bernice Lindsay. The Mr. and Mrs. OB had the funeral home.
Yes.
Okay.
I lived upstairs over there. When he couldn't find his children, he had 3. 2 girls and a boy.
Yeah.
Emil Jr.,
OB.
he was the first one in our community to get scarlet fever. We didn't even know what that was. But by me staying upstairs and growing up with the children, Pat, Camille, and Emil Jr.,
Right.
when he couldn't find them and he would be gone, he'd leave me the key. Whenever a body would come, I would have to come downstairs, go through the Holiness Church
Yeah, Mom.
that was connected to the building,
Yeah.
go down in the basement,
Oh no.
and then open the door
I knew she was on the second floor.
and let them come in through the back and put the body there.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And I had to sign the papers, lock it up, and come back upstairs.
And get
And
blood.
my mother would say, "Wash your hands."
Right.
I did that for years.
Oh no, I
Didn't that to the OBs? What was
Reed,
the
Reed's funeral was
youngest?
across the street.
What was the youngest one's name?
Who?
Email?
Camille.
Email.
The
A
youngest
girl?
girl.
Pat
Pat.
was the youngest.
She almost got me kicked out of school at 9th Street. I went to that school and that girl ran after me so bad the principal called me and I hated her. But she kept running after me and disrupting the classes and I hated her so much.
There. What about the What I'm thinking of? Who started the Columbia Savings and Loan? I'm just
Oh,
going.
Howard?
Yeah, the Halyards.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Artie Halyard, Mrs. Hardy.
Addie.
Mrs. Artie Halyard.
Yeah, I forgot.
John Halyard.
One other thing, when we went downtown, you had to be sure you was clean. You didn't have to be overdressed, but you had to be clean and you had to have decent clothes on to go downtown. Your parents would let you go. That was the pride they had. You know what I mean? You just couldn't go down there wearing just anything.
Not only that, when we were growing up, your parents come out of the house Your mother would have makeup on. She would have a decent dress on. Some of them even have gloves on.
Yes, I was gonna say gloves.
Have that special purse, their heels. That was just to go to the grocery store.
Yeah, my mother would take
Can
3
you
hours.
imagine that?
3 hours preparing herself.
Well, my grandmother used to dress, even when she was homebound, she would get up every day and dress because she said you never know when someone's going to come over.
I think back then we had a little more pride
Oh yeah.
in ourselves than
Oh, yeah.
they have today.
Mhm.
We had pride.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, if you were younger, on 11th and Galena, the red brick building was a detention home for younger
Right, on 11th.
teenagers.
Oh,
11th.
okay.
Old man Fisher was
If
over
you
there.
skipped
Yep.
school, you were out of school 2 or 3 days.
Yeah,
Probation officer, mostly Mr. Fisher, he
right,
would find you. He'd come looking for you.
right.
And you would go to the detention home on 11th and Galena, and we'd go by there, and they'd be up on the second floor, screened in.
We holler at them, say hi.
And you just didn't want that reputation. You know, there was always going to be a few. You didn't want to go to the detention home. And from the detention home, if you couldn't get along at the detention home or you went there 2 or 3 times, they sent you to Waukesha.
Walker shop.
That was a farm,
Oh.
okay? And you worked on a farm and went to school.
And from there you go to
Ah.
Green Bay if you got work.
That's right. And then I had a brother, Jerome.
Yeah, I remember
God
Joe.
bless him.
Yeah,
He's still around. He was always into something.
yeah.
They sent him to Waukesha.
Uh-oh.
I was on the street, and after a while they said, "Did you see your brother?" I said, "Which brother?" You know, there was 11 of us. 7 of them were boys. They said, "Jerome." I said, "No, Jerome is in Waukesha." They said, "Your brother's on Walnut Street, but riding 2 horses. Riding one, leading the other."
He broke out.
He decided he wanted to come home.
Oh, he would.
So
he ran away.
he took one of the
He's strong.
2 of
very
the
strong.
horses from off the farm,
Mm-hmm.
rode them bareback from Waukesha into the city. And
What did your
he riding the horses down Walnut Street.
What did your parents say?
And my older brother lived on 7th and Wall up behind the Rico. He found it out, so he went out there and took him back.
Oh.
Did he ride the spare horse? Did your older brother ride the spare horse?
No, they just.
I don't know, to be
Pretty
honest with
common.
you, I don't know how he got him back there. I have no idea. I have no idea.
You know, and there was another
What was your
thing.
oldest brother's name?
Warren.
Warren. Oh yeah.
You know, and there was another thing.
That's
in-
the one that's your cousin? No.
No, Warren. We have a cousin named Warren, but this is his oldest brother.
When we were going to school too, especially in grade school, we always had a nurse in the schools. And also in junior high school. If you came to school 2 days in a row and your clothes were not clean, that nurse would send you home with
That's
a
right.
note. If you came back the next day and she did not see any results, social services would be at your house.
That's right. See, they had a nurse in every school. They had a nurse and a probation officer.
A
And a-
probation officer?
Yes,
too?
And
and a doctor would come to the schools once a week. And that's when you would get the shots for measles and the shots for this. We'd hate to see them coming. Then we'd always have testing for lice. We didn't even know what lice was.
see, it got to
Only
the,
white folks would get lice. Black folks didn't get it because we had too much oil in our hair.
Oh.
it got to the point where they had a
I didn't
nurse in
know
every
that.
school. But what happened is the city decided it's too expensive.
That's what's going on now.
And a social worker.
That's
And
what's
I had a
going on
social
now.
worker.
Mhm.
Was it too expensive? Look what happened to the society now.
Right.
Mhm.
You're going to spend it one way or
Or another.
the other. But you had a nurse and a probation officer. You couldn't walk down. Like you go out, and you could see kids walking around. Not when we were coming up.
We'd see Miss Gallimore coming
Yeah, I
across
was
that
just saying
park.
Miss Gallimore.
Who was Miss Gallimore?
She
If
was
you
a
decide to
probation
skip,
officer.
She was our first probation officer.
Yeah, and she didn't play.
if you decide to skip school, you better be in an alley hiding in the gangway someplace. You just couldn't walk around like these kids do now.
Yeah.
No, but the police would stop you.
Mm-hmm.
The
Miss
police
Gallimore
would
would
stop
catch
you and pick you up.
Yeah, why aren't you in school?
Yes, right.
Miss Gallimore was something else. She
That's
lived
right.
down the street from Rosemary.
But yeah.
Yeah, you know about that.
I
Huh?
know Miss
That's
Gallimore.
right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
You know, when you're talking about expense, how much does it cost to incarcerate these kids, skipping school,
Tremendous.
putting them on welfare because they
$368 a
haven't
day.
been to
That's
school
right.
to learn
Yeah.
anything?
Yeah.
So when you start talking about what it costs to put a probation officer to see that these things happen, chicken feed.
Mm-hmm.
See,
And
but we've
curfew.
got away from all this. The PAL Police League.
Mm-hmm.
There was a controversy, from what I understand, between the city and the social workers about the police athletic. Like, all summer we'd play baseball, and for the police they were our managers, coaches. I don't know if you remember that.
Who?
Yeah, you said
The
that.
PAL,
Yeah.
Oh,
you
yeah.
said that.
Police Athletic League.
Yeah.
And
That's
We-
how
we
Harvard
played
became
each other.
detective.
Yeah.
And
Leroy,
they
I'm-
stopped all that, they said, because of the expense. Didn't cost the city anything but a couple baseballs and bats. They were sponsored by the
Kiwanis
Stores.
Club? Oh.
Brills,
Oh, okay.
Grocery
J.W.
stores,
Cartage
grocery
Trucking Company,
BJ.
stores.
Schlegel Candy
Yeah.
Company.
Mhm.
They would buy us a jersey, see, for your team. And you were so proud to have a wear that jersey.
Right.
And all the police did was
Coach.
they would buy us the baseballs and the bats. How much money is that? So every night, different teams would be playing, you know, in the Haymarket or Latin Park. You'd be playing each other. Place would be full of spectators. You're pulling for your team to see how the other team was coming. And the police knew that being your coaches knew most of the kids. What happened to all these things?
He knew you by name.
You remember that home that was on 4th in Galena? It was shaped like an octagon, and all the family, the boys in there could
I
knock
got a
their
picture of our team now that I played on. You got that picture?
Yeah.
It was an integrated team.
Oh.
We had Jews, Russians, Italians. I got a picture of one of the teams. It was in the journal, but we got that picture here. And what happened to all these things? All the police did was give us some baseball bats and a ball.
Sure.
Yeah, and the police
The vendors
athletic
in
league
the
is still
neighborhood.
is still around. The police athletic league is still around. So I didn't know that they went back that far.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And you know when was that? Here, number of years ago, they started curfews.
Oh yeah. 10
When
o'clock
we
and
had-
11 o'clock.
When we went on curfew,
So you didn't.
you
have-
didn't see nobody out there. You didn't mess with them policemen.
See, now if you get something like that,
Ooh.
you
The-
gotta have all this money,
the
the
parents-
whole uniform. You got, hey, that's not necessary. Spending all that money. Oh, we got the vendor. That was advertising.
Mm-hmm.
Snurkle Candy Bar, like I said, J.W. Cartage Trucking Company, and the police would give us bats and balls. City didn't pay anything.
What happened when the expressway came through? How did that impact the community when Walnut Street was
Well,
basically just?
it took our home, took two of our homes. The one at 807 West Summer Street and the one that we finally, my mother bought at 2200 North 8th Street. The expressway
There's more
removed,
coffee.
the expressway removed
I can get you some more.
8,000 homes. And they didn't care who was living in it, they just told them to get out. And it wasn't until Dennis Conta was in the assembly that they started paying people about $20,000 to help them move. But prior to that time, they told you to get out because the expressway's coming through.
But can I say something about that? I think that's the best thing that ever happened to us. It got us out of a small community and dispersed us all over the city.
Right.
People were forced to move out of there.
Right.
Otherwise,
Well, we had this good.
we
had
were,
this pros and cons.
you know, if we got to Capitol Drive when we were young, you were getting kind of uppity. But you took all these people in this small area that we're talking about, dispersed them all over the city. People got a chance to live in areas that they only just went to visit or went through it. So it was a good thing, as far as I'm concerned.
But on the,
I thought it was very good.
but on the other hand, a lot of these, majority of these people who got dispersed did not have money
Right.
to go to these other areas out there. So that was my thing. And number two, the worst part of it all, is that the people who we had in office,
Right.
this stuff was going on behind their backs. They wasn't not smart enough and on their toes to know what was going on. Because that expressway was supposed to go through round 35th Street.
Oh.
That's where they tore down all of them houses first. Then they changed their mind
And went right through our
and went right through our
So
section.
that's where we disagree.
See,
Right.
so
I
like
thought the
I said,
expressway coming through there
No.
was the best thing that happened to us.
Like remove
It made us move out and disperse into areas that we only dreamed of.
Right.
Otherwise, we were all confined in one little area. When you left that area, it was either to buy something that wasn't in the area, but I thought the expressway just really helped us. It got us out, made a move rather than just be stagnated. And then we have to be honest about this and tell the truth. It helped us move into areas that we never thought we would.
But you were
what it
displaced without compensation until later. So like my dad's mother bought a home and was forced out of it and was not compensated. Bought a second home, was forced out of that and not compensated.
That's
so she had resources, but if you had other people who didn't have resources, they would be homeless.
That's right.
And
That's
the city didn't care.
That's right.
They were just focusing on the
That was key. They
expressway.
didn't care.
Yeah, right. That was
And
it.
then we had restrictive covenants. So I'm going to
I
turn
was
the
just
camera
gonna say.
and have my mom talk about restrictive covenants. So you
Yeah.
couldn't just leave it.
Hush, hush, hush. It's her turn.
Yeah, they had restrictive covenants, which meant that blacks were not allowed to live all over the city.
That's right.
They were confined still to specific areas.
Exactly.
And the areas was south of Capitol Drive. The first black couple bought a home on Capitol Drive. I remember that.
Williamson.
The Williamsons.
That's right.
Right. And there was much
They burned a
ado
cross
about
on
nothing.
the
They
line.
burned a cross on their
Sure
line.
did.
There was all kinds of problems. But blacks were still confined from Capitol Drive south.
To not the south side. So until what was the southern border?
Walnut.
Walnut.
Walnut Street.
Walnut.
So Walnut between Capitol and Walnut.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
And what was the
Right.
western border?
35th Street, I think.
Yeah, 35th to
When you
still
got
over
to
to
35th
third.
Street, that whole under, that was too far away.
Right.
Was that too far?
Diane and Henderson, my first cousins, Diane's parents, and
Right.
lived on 37th
yeah, right there by L. Smith.
A.O. Smith.
by
Right.
A.O. Smith.
Okay.
So don't say that.
But they were the
Yeah,
only
35th
blacks
Street
there.
is the end of the
Express-
city.
But they
helped us.
were the only blacks there.
Right.
Helped us move. They took our house on 10th and Brown. Expressway went through there. But it made us disperse. We moved up here. She don't remember. I had a hell of a time getting house insurance.
Well, yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, everybody
That's what-
did.
They didn't want, we bought the house and the same company, Mortgage Associated, that loaned us the money, didn't want us to have insurance.
Yeah, well,
That's
everybody
true.
did. All those black
I don't know
Metropolitan-
about, I can't say about
Well, I'm
everybody,
just
because
saying,
I'm talking about me. I
Yeah,
don't know
but-
about everybody.
Well, we
Well,
just
they
I'm not-
had
My
I'm not-
mother was in housing.
they had restricted covenants, not only that limited where you could live, but mortgages. even today, they have areas that are called redlined
Right.
districts.
That's right.
And the mortgage companies and the banks will not lend you money in
No.
that area. And that happened forever. And then when I came on the scene, of course, that was my job from the federal government to integrate housing. And so we were successful in getting a bill passed to eliminate restrictive covenants. Then the Williamsons moved out to Wauwatosa, and Helen Alexander and her husband, they moved out to Brookville, no, Wauwatosa, Wauwatosa. And then we had some other, I'm trying to think who the first black family was that moved to Brown Deer. I was also a real estate broker, and I could not get listings outside of that designated area. I would go and try and get my listings, and they slam the door in my face when they heard me on the phone, welcome me. When they see me at the door, wow, slam the door.
Yeah.
So I had negative experiences trying to sell houses in Milwaukee. And I had one customer for Brown Deer. And I'm trying to think who that was. And I remember when Brown Deer first became integrated, and then it was a swarm of people.
Yeah. 'Cause,
And now Brown Deer is almost all black.
Helen Barnhill and Larry Katz, kind of helped to bring attention to that.
yeah. Right.
So, Mom, can you just talk about, you were director of fair housing and
Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity.
at the U.S.
U.S.
Department
Department of Housing and Urban Development
in
for the
Milwaukee.
state of Wisconsin.
And what are restrictive covenants, and also what is it, Washington Highlands?
Yeah.
That was famous for.
Washington Heights.
Can you talk about that?
Well, it just exercised it implemented the restrictive covenants.
What's restrictive covenants? Was that in the mortgage? I mean, in where in the title?
Sale of homes.
When we
Wait a
first,
minute, wait, she's
Yes.
talking.
In the sale of homes.
when we first moved here,
Go ahead.
in the front window here, I could show you baby shot, and that never stopped. And we've been here how many years? 30 some years? About 30 years.
Yeah.
What happened?
Across the street.
A kid with BB gun shot through the window.
You didn't hear the slurs. I did. I didn't tell you. I didn't want to upset you. They used to, when I'd be outside, they would call across the road and racial slurs. I didn't say anything to her. There's a BB shot still in that window. I never had it replaced.
It's a good reminder.
Two young boys. See, I didn't want to upset her, but that's still in the window where they took a BB gun.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Well, we had all kinds of reaction. In fact, it reminds me of these Trump rallies that are going on now. We had, that was before the fair housing marches, okay? And then after the marches,
In the 1960s.
yeah. And after the, Val Phillips was responsible,
And Father Grappy.
and Grappy for the marches,
Yeah.
Val Phillips for the municipal ordinance,
Yeah.
which prohibited restricted covenants, okay? And so then people were able to move out. There were no blacks on the east side, west side,
South
or
side.
north side, and definitely not the south side. And the people on the south side were just as poor or poorer than the people in the central city. But they were ethnically united. We had Polish areas and German
Italian.
areas and Italian areas
Italian.
and Irish areas. And the Irish, like in most communities, got involved in politics. And most of your elected officials were Irishmen,
Yeah.
which was very interesting, and still are.
Yeah, right.
And they call it the Irish Mafia.
Yeah.
And they control much of the laws that are happening even today.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And but I noticed that the Hispanics are beginning to move, and they have realized the importance of politics, and they are beginning to move in to key areas. Like Perez is head of the housing authority in the city, and Hector Colon is head of housing and human services in the county.
Yep.
And they have within their purview the responsibility of dispersing housing.
Dollars?
Dollars and support.
Yeah.
And but blacks have never been able to get together, come together, and come up with a strategy or a block of votes to change things for black people.
Well, that's it. That's what the whole
And
thing's
so
all
that's
about.
what it's all
Well, you know,
about.
That's what
I'm
it's
gonna
all
give you a little,
about.
give a history of what I had to go through.
Mm-hmm.
Alex Mitchell.
Who?
Alex Mitchell.
Alex
Oh,
Mitchell.
Alex,
You know
yes.
Alex.
Was a graduate out of Marquette.
Mm-hmm.
He was one of my closest friends I was raised up with.
Marquette University?
Mm-hmm.
And when I was working at the Philip Company with my brothers and rest, I was working and we went through a lot of prejudice.
At what company?
Huh?
At
Philip Orth.
Philip Orth?
I shouldn't mention names.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
That's okay.
And I worked there, and it was hard work. And they made me over the jelly and pie filling department.
He's a food processor.
And I had to work 10 hours a day, 6 days a week to make a living, barely. So they had a little small boiler, and they said they'd give you a nickel an hour more if you could get a license. So I got the license. And I knew that I couldn't keep up that work as I got older, and I saw how they were treating the other people. So what Alex Mitchell told me, he says, look, AC Electronics has an opening for man. I said, good.
AC Delco, like in Oak Creek?
They didn't want me. Alex Mitchell fought, I don't know if you know him.
Oh,
I know.
yes.
I was
We
He
know
was
him
my
very
close,
well.
one of
They
my
know him.
closest friends.
I was on the
Yeah,
track
Mary
team.
Mitchell's former
He
husband.
could run.
And he was one of my closest. So he got me the job. And
AC Spark Plug.
when I went there, I was the only black in that powerhouse. It wasn't a boiler room. It was a powerhouse out there, AC Electronics.
In Oak Creek?
Uh,
Was it in Oak Creek at that time?
yes.
Okay.
And it was hard when I went in there. There was prejudice. But the guys were stereotyped. They got to know me and everything went along real fine. Okay, I was the last hired, so I was the first laid off when they started going back.
Oh yeah.
Well, in a way it was good because they sent me out to General Motors in Janesville to get a job, but we didn't want to move, so I didn't take it. Well, anyway, I got a couple jobs, and I got my first class stationary engineer job, the engineer license. So I got hired at Philip Morris subsidiary, and from there I went up, but the prejudice. I remember when I was getting hired at that first place, they went in another room and they were discussing my application, and I heard one guy say, well, they was concerned about me being African American, would I be able to handle a job? So this one guy says, well, we don't have a choice. At that time, you had to be licensed to operate their boiler room and powerhouse, and I had the license. And they said, we don't have a choice. Well, from there, it just went up. You know, first black in, we went through a lot of problems. But after a while, they got to know me and they relaxed the stereotype. It wasn't a hatred, it was a stereotype.
Right.
As I went along, I went one job to another, and I made a lot of money at the end. You know,
How did you get along with the people who had attitudes?
At first it was kind of rough, but after they got to know me and realized it was a stereotype. I remember one guy named Hanson. He said, you know what they say about black people? He said it's a stereotype. Because when I first got there, he thought black.
Mm-hmm.
He wouldn't work with anyone else but me after the first time I worked with him. I changed attitudes. I didn't go in there with an attitude I'm black, I gotta fight this. I went in there and I kept it to myself, did my job, did what I had to do. Some of them I liked, got to be kind of close to, some of them I didn't. But it opened up an opportunity to me to get jobs that I would have never had, to make money that I would have never been able to do if I'd have went in there with my boxing gloves on every day.
Right.
You know what I mean? You have to learn to get along in life, to adjust to things that it's not in your favor. So you have to learn. You learn like sawing a piece of wood and nail it together. You learn by adapting to people. The stereotype in your head has got to go. I've had prejudice because of my white skin, blacks and whites. I had to fight them on both sides. So after a while, you try to adjust. Believe me, David. Many times I sit downstairs and think about it. I cry. But what are you going to do? I can't change the world, but I had to make a living for my family.
Right.
They came first. Prejudice was there. I had to fight it.
Yeah, that's what I tell them when we was in school. I tell them kids, you know, you look over their shoulder and learn. You know what I'm saying? You don't do the same thing they do.
Right.
You don't have to live the way they do. What you need to do is look over their shoulder. You know. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I've had blacks hit me as much as whites because of my light skin. Stereotype that I think I'm better. Spend too damn much time thinking about color
Right.
instead of other things that I could put my mind to.
Right.
They get ahead. And here I'm thinking about some stupid thing about race.
Right.
Yeah, it's still in the forefront now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Race, race, race. That's all you hear about.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you, everyone, for your time and for sharing your experiences with all of us. Yes.
One more thing, I'd like Billie Joe to tell about the Walnut Street Club. She was one of the founders.
Back in the 80s, it got to the point where a lot of us who were born here in Milwaukee and into the community, that we were always seeing each other at funerals.
Right.
And it got to the point where I decided to say, enough is enough. We ask about certain ones when we don't see them. And then when it happens, then we're saying, oh, I wish I had known. So what I did was try to get enough people together to get together just to socialize, those of us who were raised and grew up in the community, to be there for each other, whether they needed someone to help if they're ill or to help if someone does pass away or whatever the case may be. So this is how the Walnut Street Social Gathering Club started. We started at the Martin Luther King Center down on Valete. And Reuben Clifford Pitts was the one who got us into the building to start this together gathering group. So as we started, and then we lost that position around, I guess we started in 1980, I would say 1982. And then in 83 or 84, I think we moved to the House of Peace. Father Matthew was very gracious and let us come there. And what we did was we would meet every second Saturday of the month. As we sort of progressed with this thing, and we had a number of, I think our first member was a total of about 250. Mm-hmm. It was really a wonderful thing to meet on these dates. We decided to have a card party, men's card party, then a ladies' card party. Then we would do socializing, and we would go on some of the gambling trips, or we'd go on plays. Then we decided that we would like to celebrate for every year. So then we started planning a New Year's get-together party. So we have that once a year. So this is how the club has started. We wanted to take the place where we all grew up into the Brownsville community. So we chose Lapham Park, which is now known as Carver Park. And this was where we would have our picnics.
Every third Saturday.
In the late years, the third Saturday in August. This is when we would have the picnics. And we would have so many to return and come back from out of town
Come
to
from all
these
over the country.
get-togethers. They would come from all over the country. And we would also gather at different people's homes in order to gather information on what our next agenda would be. We would have, committees for different things that we needed to do and get around. Later years, we have moved now, I think, to Brown Deer Park.
Wow.
Yeah. But it has been a wonderful journey. It truly has.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. and Mrs. Sims, Mr. and Mrs. Harpole, and hopefully this will be archived. I plan to upload it to YouTube so other people can access it, and also on my Facebook page. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yes.
You remember Clarence Smith?
Do you want to
Well, his
read
mother,
it?
well, but it's just sorting the paper. Had just passed. She was 99.
Wow.
Can you hold the book up? Can you hold the book? Stand between Mr. and Mrs. Sims.
Did you know Clarence?
African Americans have moved up
Yeah, no.
so much
Yeah.
since we came up.
Really?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Holding,
Things have changed.
Will Richardson?
excuse me,
Dramatically.
Excuse me.
Will and Bruce
Holding the book
Richardson?
up is
Their
Octavio
father was a
Toloza, and he's holding up the book
veterinary doctor.
Milwaukee's Bronzeville,
Lived in
1900
Eighth Street,
1950.
Eighth here.
And my dad, Reuben Harpole, wrote the introduction to it. It's written by Paul. Who's it written by?
Or
Bruce is dead.
Garens?
again,
Paul
Book was
Garens.
dead, but I know Bruce had died.
Thank you.
Thank
Really?
you
Big
so much.
Bruce gone,
He might be dead.
yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
I know
Oh,
his sister
and Alex
Billie
Mitchell
died.
was your friend.
She been